Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Good crowd considering it's 9:15 in the morning, so thank you guys for coming. On behalf of American Express, it's a pleasure to welcome you back to our final panel here at the Restaurant Trade Program, Relevance Today, Adapt, Evolve, and Innovate. So for those of you who I haven't met yet, I'm Danielle Wallace from American Express. I'm the Vice President of Merchant Services in the US, leading our industry development group. And I hope you all will agree, it's just been a fantastic weekend and we couldn't be happier with how everything has gone. We've heard from industry stars about cultivating culture, attracting and retaining talent, as well as the changing culinary landscape. We've networked, we've eaten delicious food from both Alan Shaya and team, as well as Will Gadar and team. I think you guys will all agree the hummus was amazing, the fried chicken yesterday was amazing, it's just been fantastic. So from all of us at American Express, I just want to thank you all for your engagement, your attendance, and joining us at what we think is one of the best restaurant trade programs we've had in years. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Curtis Stone, who's going to host our third and final panel. Curtis is an acclaimed chef, restaurateur, author, and television personality. He's the chef and owner of Maud and Gwen Butcher Shop and Restaurant in LA. So please join me in welcoming Curtis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, firstly, I want to say a couple of thank yous because without American Express's support, we wouldn't get to do this. And building a community in the restaurant business is so important. Also, Hotel Jerome for being our host today. Thank you very much. Bolt's company have done such an incredible job. It's not the easiest group of people to pull together, the hospitality group, and you've managed to do it. So congratulations. And of course, Food and Wine. I mean, what a magazine, and without them, we all wouldn't be sitting here. So thank you to all of the people that have brought us together. I'm joined by such an incredible panel. I feel super humbled right now. Will Gadara from 11 Madison Park needs no introduction, and I'm going to get to a little bit more of an introduction as we go through. Ashley Christensen from Raleigh, North Carolina. We've got Gary Obligation. I've been practicing his surname for 2 days, so I'm going to repeat it several times throughout the course of our panel. And Alan Shaya as well. So, four unbelievable industry leaders here, and what we're here to talk about is relevance. And the more I've contemplated this, what is relevance? The harder it gets to actually answer. It's a bit of a chicken and the egg question, right? Do these guys become relevant because they're so interesting and they're so passionate and they build such amazing teams and they have such incredible creativity? Or is it something that they actually think about and they sit back and think, how do I stay relevant to my market for the health of my business and for the success of my operations? And that's kind of what we're going to get into here today. So, if you think about competitiveness, there's not many industries more competitive than ours. There's not a huge barrier to entry when you think about it. You can open a food establishment with a relatively low amount of money, and you can do it with virtually no education at all, which means it's pretty much open to everybody. So I want to first start with you, Ashley, and talk about competitiveness, because you have 7 restaurants in Raleigh, which means you're competing with yourself, not only the rest of the market. And if you think about America, we have incredible diners on every single corner, and that's an area that you've really focused on and done so well at. So when you think about competing, you sold 15,000 orders of mac and cheese at Paul's Diner in a year, all right? So, if you think about a business model and you think, I'm going to sell mac and cheese, well, guess what? There's a lot of other people that want to sell mac and cheese as well. So how have you been so successful and achieved what you've achieved so quickly?
Sure. Well, I live in a city that I think was really ready for folks to invest energy and stay and hang around and be a part of the city itself's evolution. And, for me, I grew up in a small town in North Carolina, moved to Raleigh, went to school, and really felt like I would always move to a larger city. And I just really started to fall in love through a bunch of different projects and experiences with this place. And I was watching all the growth that was happening there and just felt like it was a perfect place to invest energy and that I could make a real difference. And so when it came to opening a restaurant, you mentioned diners on every corner. I started looking for a shop and ended up finding this incredible diner that I had actually been a bartender and a line cook at in my years past. And just, you know, kind of dug in and thought, let's figure it out here. So, yeah, I just, you know, the time was right. It was a time where the city was really excited about changing. And the place where I live is the capital city of North Carolina, which has been a very interesting place in the last few years. But, you know, it was perceived as a government town and kind of a steakhouse town, and food hadn't really lit up there. So it seemed like a great time to do something fun and to, you know, I loved living there and being there. So I wanted to contribute something to my city, and so that's what we did with Pools Diner. And we're in our 10th year now, which is awesome. And about 3 years in, we started working on other projects. But I think, you know, to the conversation about taking something simple and making it matter to people, that's what that dish is about to us. And you know, just caring about the details and things.
And as you've gone on to open more places, obviously your focus becomes on the new place. How do you stay relevant in the old place? How do you make sure that that's still just as appealing and just as busy as it ever was?
Sure, and it's a great question. It's one that we think about all the time now. And I think, you know, for me being, I opened up my first restaurant, you know, I guess I was 31 years old. And it was a super exciting experience. And then, you know, I think opening a restaurant will connect you with community in a way that is so different than anything else. And you're feeding people and you're having conversations and you're talking with people about, you know, what they want to happen in their city. And so the more that I, you know, got comfortable there and started to listen to the people around me, I started to really think about not just the things that I wanted to do, but what my city needed.
Yep.
And so, and then the second piece of that for me was working with all these great people who, you know, we have 70 seats in this little diner, and we've got a great crew, and we're having such a good time, but at some point, everything's going so great, and you look up and you know your people are gonna hit the ceiling at some point with a chef, owner, operator in a small restaurant. So I started to think about expansion for my city and expansion for our team, and so that's sort of how we jumped into these other things. And I'd been traveling quite a bit and looking at the idea of sort of single note businesses in all these great cities that I was traveling to. And I love that. I love the idea, you know, like that dish that you bring up, something like macaroni au gratin, such a simple thing. But when you make each order and you care about every single detail that goes into it, that's what makes it stand out. And that's why people, it's not just because it's mac and cheese, it's because it's mac and cheese that makes people feel like we care about them. So I looked at, you know, concepts that made sense to me, that I feel like people wake up in the morning and go like, hey, today I want this. And I wanted to think about those subjects and be the best I could possibly be every single day and a little bit better the next day at each of those things. So simple as fried chicken and hamburgers and, you know, well, hey, a liquor bar.
We hear that you might be migrating somewhere soon, which there's whispers of. Is there anything you can share with us?
I always hear that, yeah, I don't know. But I'll tell you, so our path forward, very in tune to this conversation, is, you know, I think when we talk about opening restaurants, and every time I'm traveling around, people say, oh, you're doing so many things, it's so exciting. And it is exciting, but it's also terrifying, super stressful, and somewhere in the middle of all that magic, you ask yourself, what the hell am I doing? You know, so I think that, I think all of us would agree that opportunity is tremendously charming. Mm-hmm. And as you mature a little bit, you learn to vet ideas and exciting opportunities a little bit more. But we grew really fast, and I don't regret any of the moves we made, but I'm really excited about sort of pulling things back. We've got one more project that we're working on, and I've committed to that being our last project as a restaurant group, because somewhere in the middle of trying to figure out what we were doing, it became really exciting to work really closely with mentoring our people and developing these systems. I sat in on the 2 panels yesterday, and it was just, I can't believe how much information I pulled from yesterday's conversations about all the things we've been working on for months and months and months now. But it's an amazing thing to recognize what you really want to do. You know, like opening restaurants is great, and it's so tremendous to feed people, but employing people and firing people up to become a greater part of communities where we live and beyond is just tremendous. So what we're excited about doing now when it comes to, in the conversation of being relevant, I think, to be relevant, you have to always be analyzing what you're doing. And I have this concept of, I don't believe in the word perfect. I don't want to be perfect, I want to be great. Because if we're perfect, we don't have room to grow. And we're also mistaken if we think we're perfect. So we're really excited right now about taking all this energy we've put into growing, we're turning it within and growing our people.
Well, thank you for the segue, because once you become perfect, I guess you become number one in America, and then you become number one in the world. So, Will, congratulations, first of all, mate. Unbelievable. I can remember coming to 11 Madison Park when I first came to the States, which was probably 12 or 13 years ago, and I've been lucky enough to come back every couple of years and experience it and watch its unbelievable progression. And we all know your story so well, but I want to ask you about, as we talk about becoming relevant, you guys decided to close the restaurant. You just closed it a few days back. In any other industry, with any other business, you would imagine once you get to the top, you just hold on to those reins as tight as you possibly can, and you make as much money as you can. You guys have taken a totally different approach. You're closing the best restaurant in the world to reopen it. So what's behind that decision? Do you regret it? Because I know you made that decision before you became number one. I'm joking. No, I really want to know what's behind the decision and why it's so important to you guys to continue to re-evolve and rediscover yourselves.
No, do we regret it? I mean, no.
Of course.
I think in one sense, yeah, things are really good at the restaurant right now, and some might say, in fact, my dad is an old school restaurateur, and he seems to think that half of the things we do are just crazy. His voice is the exact same as mine, except just an octave lower, and he's like, Will, what the hell are you doing? He also, to the competition thing before, I feel like our business isn't actually that competitive anymore. My dad still lives in a world where we just opened a restaurant called Made Nice, and he called me, he's like, Will, all the other restaurants, they're gonna be on social media saying they saw mice in your restaurant. I'm like, Dad, I don't think that's actually how it works anymore. No, listen, so on the wall of the kitchen in 11 Madison Park, we have the phrase, it says endless reinvention. And change is kind of a part of our DNA. Daniel Hume and I were hired by Danny Meyer. And so you got him at a panel yesterday. Inevitably, if I'm here, you're going to get a little bit of him, because the foundation of everything I do and know is given to me by that man. And change became a part of who we are, because when we got there, it was a 180-seat brasserie, and we were serving Côte de Boeuf and shellfish plateaus, and we were charged with making it a different restaurant. But we didn't have the resources to shut the restaurant down completely, reinvest in it, and evolve it all at once. It was something that had to be done slowly over years. And I can say with confidence that I'm not today the most patient person in the world, but I was decidedly less patient then. And that was really difficult for us. But it was actually the biggest blessing we could have ever hoped for. Because change is it's a bizarre idea. People hate change, but they also hate complacency. And I think the key kind of idea, likely of what we are talking about today, is trying to find balance in between those two ideas. And change is also uncomfortable. It's challenging for the guest. It's challenging for the staff. And based on the fact that we had to make changes slowly over so many years, we as an organization became comfortable with it. The thing is, we made a decision, as much as we were going to embrace change, we never wanted to change for the sake of it. Mm-hmm. Our whole thing regarding reinvention, and really the reason why we're closing now and starting over, is because we believe so strongly that to be the greatest restaurant you can be, I guess really to be the greatest anything that you can be, it needs to be authentic. Our whole thing is that we don't want to serve an experience that we don't want to experience ourselves. And for that reason, we've changed a lot. Daniel and I were very lucky, like I guess every one of us in this room, by definition of the fact that we're here. We get to travel a lot, and we get to go out and experience all these places. There was a while where we'd go to these restaurants and we'd have these 15-course tasting menus, and we loved them. And then it was a few years ago that we were on like course number 10, and maybe it's that we're not as young as we used to be. I don't know what it is, but we were over it, and we realized that we were serving that exact meal at home, and so we had to change, and that's kind of been the theme of our evolution ever since. And about a year ago, we had the great fortune of signing a 20-year lease at the restaurant, another 20 years, which in New York is a big deal. A lot of places close at the end of their leases. And it was just one of those moments where we took a look at what we were doing. We took a look at the restaurant, and we had to do a gut check to say, is this thing that we are running exactly what we want to experience as a guest? And it just wasn't. And so regardless of whether the world was giving us the affirmation that we'd spent all those years seeking, I think you need to change for yourself and not for other people. I think we've been asked to be on these boards of big companies who are trying to figure out how to evolve their product, and they talk so much about guest feedback and user surveys to figure out what people want. And then they make the decisions on how to evolve what they're doing based on what they hear the guests they're serving want. But by the time you create that product, I think it's too late. I think the way to evolve is it needs to be genuine to you. You need to create the thing that you want to have and then hope that other people will want to have it as well. And so far it's worked, and I hope it continues to work.
How's the pressure? I remember I worked for Marco Pierre White when he won his 3rd Michelin star, and it felt like the drive to get that 3rd star was no longer there, and there wasn't a 4th star to go and chase.
Yes.
So how is there some level of nervousness internally for you guys on how you or how you keep the drive to, now that you're the world's best restaurant,
Yes.
which you should say many times to yourself. But how on earth do you stay motivated? Because what else is there to chase?
I think that's the beautiful part of that list. Like once you have 4 stars from the New York Times and 3 stars from Michelin, that list, we always used to say in honoring it, one of the beautiful parts of it is that we may not compete with other restaurants. We don't feel a sense of competition with the other 4-star restaurants in New York, but we're competitive as individuals. And it's really healthy, even if not for Daniel and I, but for our entire staff, to have like something that you're going for, to have this tangible idea, something that you pursue. And yeah, to your point, there's almost a void that needs filling once that's gone. This is my feeling on that list. I don't think it's possible to name the best restaurant in the world. I think that's a little bit absurd. I think what it does do, and this is the most validating thing for us as an organization, is it maybe just gives a little nod to the restaurant that is embodying an approach that other people connect with. I think when Ferran did it, it was molecular gastronomy, and then when Renee got it, it was all about foraging and the locavore movement. And what I'm proud of is that I work with a chef who cares about service just as much as he does food. And our entire approach is that we run the restaurant from both sides of the wall. We care so much about excellence, but we also care so much about hospitality. And that philosophy, the approach of putting both on equal footing, that I think is the thing that was acknowledged by that list. And so if there's not like a shiny accolade to reach for, now I feel like our mission is to try to just, scream that from the mountaintop as much as we can, because we derive a ton of satisfaction from what we get to do in the dining room every night. And I found a chef who honors that. And so if what our success can do is inspire more chefs to really invest in the people in the dining room, that would be a dream come true.
It's really interesting because you guys seem like you're such wonderful collaborators internally, meaning front and back, talking together, which doesn't happen everywhere. It's a struggle. We all know how hard it is to keep those lines of communications open and positive. But you're also, in my mind, incredible collaborators with the industry. So whether it be doing the restaurant swap you did with Alinea, or whether it be your entrance into the Los Angeles market, the way you've gone about it, you decide, well, before we come and open a restaurant, because of course there's all these LA guys down there sort of thinking, oh, here come the big New York restaurateurs. Instead of having any kind of competition, you actually send a food truck first, you reach out to all of the great chefs of LA, you ask them to collaborate on stuff. And, you know, I feel like as an industry, we get so much stronger when we work together.
Yeah.
And I feel like people like you, Danny for that matter, you mentioned Danny earlier, and I spoke to him about it yesterday up on the mountaintop. You're pioneers of the industry in that way, and you collaborate. You know, the old school of thought is, this is my recipe, and I'm not going to share it with anyone. And the new way of thinking is much more collaborative.
Yes.
Can you talk to that a little bit about your attitude with it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely started at the restaurant. I said endless reinvention is on the wall. There's actually 11 words on the wall, and one of the other ones is collaboration. And that came from, excuse me, this moment like 9 years ago when Daniel and I realized that there were just two of us and we were making all these decisions in like this little windowless office in the back of our restaurant. And that when we actually opened up our eyes and looked at the people we were working with, we had Harvard graduates and Yale graduates, a lot of people decidedly smarter than either of the two of us. And if we can involve them in the collaborative process, engage them in the creative process, they would feel a much more significant ownership in the direction we're going. When you feel ownership in what you're trying to create, you are going to work a hell of a lot harder, and you are going to be that much more dedicated to ensure its success. And then we basically just realized it was awesome and fun to dream with more people.
Yeah.
And so then we did the thing with Alinea, and that just came because we were doing a cookbook event in Chicago, and we were out drinking afterwards. And listen, I think a lot of the great ideas in our world start with with two things. One, a bottle of something, and then next, wouldn't it be cool if? And Daniel and I just made a promise to each other like 5 years ago that whenever we said, wouldn't it be cool if, no matter how ridiculous what came next was, we would at least give it a chance. And a lot of those ideas, they're not financially profitable, but you know what? We all work really, really hard, and work becomes life, and life is supposed to be fun. That's at least my perspective. And if you seize on those moments where you say, wouldn't it be cool if blank, and then you just do it, I think that's the secret to happiness. And more often than not, that involves working with a lot of other people. Like we got to work with you, and you know, getting to collaborate and engage with people that you have a ton of love and respect for, it just makes this whole thing feel that much more worthwhile.
It's really cool. So let's turn our focus to reinvention for a moment. I've got a little 24-seat restaurant in Beverly Hills. We've been open 4 years. We do a new menu every single month with a different star ingredient. We're 4 years in now, and we're kind of feeling maybe a little tired by it. You know, we feel like we need to sort of be re-inspired. So we've decided that this is our last year. And we just made the announcement yesterday that this is our last year, and we're going to start something new. We're not even 100% sure what that new is just yet. But it's certainly a personal thing. You know, it's not, we're busy, we're full. We've been full every night since we opened. So it's not to try and draw more business, and it's not to try and, you know, get our average spend up. It's just because we want to do something a bit different. Gary, you've got a really interesting background. I want to ask you a little bit about how Alinea is continuing to reinvent itself. But well, let's start there. So you've been with Alinea
4.5 years.
4.5 years. So you've seen a lot of change, and you've just decided to close the restaurant, or you've just reopened the restaurant a little whiles back. But in the break, you took the restaurant on the road to Miami and down to Madrid. How was that? First of all, why the reinvention? Because, I mean, I don't know how you get much more inventive than sucking helium out of a taffy balloon in the restaurant. You guys...
Those drunken nights that Will's talking about.
Yeah. You're at the absolute forefront of creativity in this country. Tell me why you decided to reinvent it, and then while you did, why you took the restaurant on the road.
So I guess the conversation starts around about 2013 or 14, where on the horizon was the 10th anniversary of Alinea. We knew it was coming, and we knew that something significant needed to happen. because you get to that point and you don't want to end up looking backwards and saying, wow, I wish we had evolved or shifted or changed then, because by that point it's well too late. So we knew something had to happen, but we didn't know what. We didn't want to just change the carpeting or throw paint on the walls. We needed that complete reset, what Will's going through right now with Relevance Madison Park. So shutting down the restaurant became a key thing, and our architects came forward and they took a series of conversations that we'd had over the course of years, and they had a single blueprint that somehow incorporated everything we wanted to do. It was mind-blowing, but it meant tearing the restaurant down to the studs, and which is terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying, and you break, that iconic staircase we had and all the glass, and it shatters, and it becomes a big pile of rubble, and Nick Kokonis is standing in the room saying, put it back, and you can't, and you can't. Along with this conversation, we have Grant Achatz actually doing the Cuatro Manos project in Spain. And he's sitting at a table, one of these drunken nights, he's at a table, and is talking about what to do with the staff. I wish we could pop up someplace, maybe like Spain. At that table was Javier Gutierrez, who is the business partner for restaurant Danny Garcia. He said, I can do that. And we said, what do you mean? He's like, if you want to pop up in Spain, I can do that. I don't think any of us understood the magnitude of what he was talking about, but it started the ball rolling. Another year of conversations, and we end up stopping the clock on New Year's Eve. On the 31st, we stopped service. On January 4th, we had 47 employees on planes to Spain.
Wow.
What we discovered in the course of taking those employees to Madrid, and then to Miami, and then back to Chicago, and popping up our own restaurant as progression, as we're getting ready to go into a new space that looks nothing, feels nothing, like the original Lydia that we all knew so well for a decade, was that we were willing to take risks that we never would have taken had we stayed in our existing space. We had got to know ourselves better. We got to get out there and say, wow, we can do this, we can do that, and just options we never even considered. And that's what happens when you have success, which we had. If we look at 2015, by any measure, covers, revenues, profitability, it was our best year ever. And we took that moment to shut down. And that's the perfect time. We had momentum. We had press. We were getting ink. We were able to challenge ourselves. And that's what it's all about. We talk a lot about staying relevant. Relevant's part of it. Change was brought up. Anything that doesn't change is probably dead, right? So you have to look at it and say, what do we do to not just do change for change's sake, but how do we stay true to ourselves? What is our core mission? What is our value? And what is really the nugget of truth that keeps us going on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment, service-by-service basis? And we were able to find that, and it wasn't easy.
Something that strikes me about your group, it's such a diverse group of individuals. You've got Nick, who for all intents and purposes is a bloody tech genius.
Yes.
You've got Grant, who just, to me, is pure creativity and kind of the nutty professor. And then you've got you, Cornell educated, worked with Alice Waters and a lot of the greats.
I'm actually UC Berkeley.
Oh, I beg your pardon, UC Berkeley.
I was about to
That
say,
was you.
wow, I didn't even realize that.
UC Berkeley, but you started working for Alice at Chez Panisse while you were at UC Berkeley. And there's this interesting mix of really well-educated, incredible restaurant experience, and then this genius creativity. Which brings me back to the first question of what is relevance? Is relevance something that you sit down and analyze and think, we need to stay relevant to keep the health of our business intact? Or is it the opposite? Is it that you're so creative and so interesting that you're very relevant?
I think it's both, actually. I don't think there's one, it's not either one or the other, it's a combination. So one, you want to stay part of the conversation. When the world's 50 best list comes out, and you're being talked about in 50 best or 100 best or anywhere in that dialogue or debate saying our city, our restaurant, our region should have been more recognized than it is, you're part of the conversation.
Right.
Relevant. Right? Now, what gets you there is a variety of things. Are you a part of your community? And now, the community can mean any number of things. Our goal for the Alinea Group is not just to be the best in the West Loop or the best on Halstead. And it's not even just the best in Chicago, it's to be the best. Now what does that mean? That's measuring up to our own standards on a day-by-day basis. It's being part of a global community where we go out to World's 50 Best in Melbourne, and there's this outreach of chefs and restaurateurs and operators and being part of that conversation. Relevance is being part of the conversation. Now, for us, sometimes it's sitting there and thinking about a detail. So part of our experience when we reopened Alinea is we have the gallery. The gallery experience right now brings guests in, and it puts them in this fine dining experience where they're paying roughly $500 a person for dinner, and they're seated at a communal table. And it's jarring. And people walk in, they're like, I didn't sign up for this. I came to have this special date, this special occasion, and I'm seated at a banquet, right? And it's shocking. But then they kind of let themselves go into that experience, and right when they're starting to talk to the person on their right or their left, we get them up from the table and we take them into the kitchen for a course. They come back out and we've blown it up. Now it's tables. It's exactly what they expect in the first place. And it happens in about 3 minutes.
Wow.
And they don't understand what just happens. We had a 20-minute meeting talking about a detail of that, where we have these, it was springtime, we have these potted plants over the table, we pour hot liquid into them, this wonderful aroma, there's, the steam or fog spilling out onto the table. But we had a 20-minute meeting talking about the string to hold up those plants. What color does it need to be? Do we want the guests to see it? Do we want them to not see it? Should it be white? Should it be black? Should it be color? Should it be green? How low does it hang? And that's talking about string. So relevance is really looking at details, whatever those details may be in your organization. Because the conversation for us at Alinea is very different than it's going to be for Next, depending on the concept, or Aviary, depending on what cocktail experience we're doing there, or Royster, which is a fried chicken joint in a lot of ways.
So when you open Royster, because I think a lot of people think that's the natural progression, right? You go from this fine dining restaurant, we know how hard it is to make money in fine dining, but you have this fine dining establishment, and then you go ahead and open up something that's a little larger, little more open to the market. So you guys did it with Royster. Was that kind of the plan, or explain to us why Royster was the next choice?
Royster was the next choice because of Chef Andrew Brochu specifically. So Chef Andrew Brochu is the chef partner of that restaurant. He was part of the opening staff of Alinea way back in the day as a cook. He was able to lead the organization, find his voice as a chef. Tremendously talented, and we had the opportunity to bring him back into the fold, but we didn't know what to do with him. Tremendously talented man, but no real spot for him. The Alinea, chef de cuisine and executive chef spots were filled. Aviary was too small. Dave Barron was still with us at Next. There was no place for him. But we said we want to do a project. So we started having these conversations and evolving the restaurant. So his unique background is he's from Florida. So while he understands food through the Alinea lens and understands Grand Atkinson's style of cooking, he wants to bring Florida forward. He wants to bring that southern roots. He wants to serve grits and then shave white truffles over the top, right? And that's not a bad thing.
And why shouldn't he?
So when we looked at it, the restaurant Royster became more so, one, what does the chef do? What is their voice? What do they want to say? Mm-hmm. So you want to take care of your people as they evolve, right? At the same time, we were looking at a restaurant that we wanted to dine at on a regular basis. Alinea is for many people once in a lifetime experience, but there are those restaurants that we all go to weekly or a few times a month. And Royster fit that niche for us because it was the type of food that we like to eat on a regular basis that we couldn't find exactly what it was, so we just opened it.
So at Alinea, the service is super detailed. I'm a big fan because I've stolen a couple of your staff, well trained.
He's not kidding.
They were actually moving to Los Angeles, and they just happened to come and work for me. So your service is impeccable at Alinea, and there's a lot going on, whether it's rhubarb hanging off fishing line from the ceiling on one of my last visits, helium balloons I mentioned. How does that come about? Is that a chef thing and you guys sit down and talk about it? Is it a service thing and you bring the ideas to the kitchen? How does it work?
Again, it goes both directions. So sometimes chef will come forward and say, here's what's happening, and he'll tell us, and then just say, figure it out. Like, awesome, this is going to be fun. How many, chef? The entire dining room tonight. Here we go. So there's that. But oftentimes he'll say, I want to do a service component. I want to do more table side. What can we do? Bring me ideas. And so we as a group, and we're much more collaborative than many organizations I've been in, where we're not just talking to the managers. We'll talk managers, captains, food runners. Because like you were just talking about, all these wonderful people, smart people in your organization, we have 300 people in the Innovate group. And, it's not monster, but a great idea can come from any direction. So we're looking at the people who's a food runner who may say, I have a better way to do this. And you trust their opinion because they touch that service piece every night. They're going to the table.
I think that is the essence of relevance. I don't care how creative any one of us up here or anyone in the room are, we're going to run out of good ideas. And if your ego is too big that you don't allow anyone, regardless of their position, to actually fully engage in the process, you're going to become irrelevant. But if you have 21-year-old kids that have never worked in the restaurant business designing something in the next course, that's how you maintain. I mean, like, people become irrelevant because they don't understand Snapchat. I don't understand it, but if you actually engage people regardless of experience, just because they bring a new perspective, that's when you maintain significance. And that's why I think we've always worked well together, is because as significant as a group may become, if you can keep your ego at the door and understand that anyone's idea could potentially be better than yours, that's the most important thing.
Such a huge element is listening
Right.
Completely.
across the board.
It's funny because in our industry, you think of these dominant personalities, whether they're front of house, back of house, business owners. You think of people wanting something done and it's done my way and you've got to listen to me. But what we're hearing here is, four incredible industry leaders that have a very different opinion to that.
Yes.
Right? It's way more collaborative than I guess it's been in the past, and maybe that's a moment of change.
I hope so.
Alan, you have a really interesting story. You're born in Israel, you moved to Philly, you were inspired by your granny cooking. Way to go, me too.
Grannies.
Yes. And then you moved to New Orleans. You worked with Mark Besh, and your career was evolving really, really nicely. You opened a couple of Italian restaurants, and you did really well, right? Then you went back to Israel. And from the outside looking in, it seems like something world-changing happened to you on that trip, and you came back and said, I'm opening a restaurant that's got nothing to do with what I've been doing.
Yeah.
But tell us the story from your perspective, because we'd all just love to hear it.
Yeah, I mean, being born in Israel and coming to America as a 4-year-old and really spending the next 20 years of my life doing nothing but pushing that history that I had away because I was trying to fit in. Like, the last thing you want to do when you get to kindergarten is like teach everyone your native language. Like you want to become friends with people, right? And you want to fit in. And so when I came, I worked really hard on forgetting all of that, which I can't say that I regret. I wish that I would have embraced it, but everything kind of falls in line, and you can't really predict where it's going to take you. And I started working in restaurants when I was 14. I started cooking Italian food. Pretty much when my home economics teacher took me and said, "Okay, we're gonna fix your life," because I was getting arrested. I was selling drugs. I was stealing cars. I was like a shithead, and my mom hated me. So I went into home economics class to hang out with girls and pick up knives. And my teacher said, you have a talent. Like, you can actually do something good for the world if you really just focus on this. And I did, and she got me my first job in a restaurant, and I started cooking Italian food. And Italian food really kind of sung to me. In one way, it reminded me of the roasted peppers and the goat cheese and the olive oils that I was used to eating with my grandmother and my mother as a child when we would cook Israeli food at the house. But to me, that was all lame. I wanted to go and explore the world. So I began working in Italian restaurants. I worked my way through some restaurants in Las Vegas and St. Louis, and I come back to New Orleans, and then I kind of have this idea in my head at the time that my goal in life is going to be to create some type of Italian food that's going to change the world, that everyone's going to see and become inspired by and create something that they've never seen before. And I was kind of in this really kind of immature, egotistical way thinking about that. And then Hurricane Katrina hit. And if anything, that was the one big bang, for me, because immediately after the storm, I was on the streets, cooking red beans and rice, serving people that, had been stuck in their attics for days or just rescued from their roof, or feeding people that were rescuing people. And, seeing like the look in those people's eyes when I would hand them a really crappy plate of red beans and rice, because like there wasn't any sausage or peppers or onions like in New Orleans. It was just like dry goods. So it brought them so much joy. And I remember that feeling of like, wait a minute, this is why I began cooking. Because throughout my childhood, I would cook something to get a smile on somebody's face. It wasn't happening through my math skills or, my English literature studies. It was through, hey, let me put something of myself into this and give it to you, and I want to share it with you, and I hope that it brings you some type of joy or comfort. And in New Orleans, when all the cards were down and I was able to do that, it really struck me. And I thought to myself, I want to cook the food that's going to make people happy and not necessarily cook the food that's going to make me think like I'm doing something interesting. So I threw my arugula coulis recipe out the window, and I moved, after a couple years of kind of getting New Orleans, getting everything back onto its feet, I moved to Italy to apprentice and work with grandmothers, Italian grandmothers, and chefs, and I worked for a family in Parma that was, 3 generations of family working in a restaurant. And I saw that there was a story that was greater than themselves, that they weren't making fresh pasta just to please their guest. They were making fresh pasta to teach their children how to make fresh pasta so that they could eventually take over the restaurant and please their customers. And this business had been in their family since the late 1700s, when they were selling salamis out of like a little convenience store situation, and then grew it into a full restaurant. And that story really stuck with me. And at that point I was like, okay, my story is now Italy. Like I'm gonna go and I'm gonna become the next Mario Batali, and I'm gonna do all things Italian. And I came back to New Orleans and I opened Domenica, which at the time there wasn't anybody doing wood-fired pizzas, there wasn't an in-house salumi program, there wasn't like a restaurant that had a whole section of the menu of just fresh pastas, extruded and rolled. And so I came back and I opened Domenica with the sense that I wanted to make people happy with the food and not necessarily just cook for myself. And that began to work. And I was, I wouldn't flinch at making fettuccine Alfredo for customers that came in and wanted fettuccine Alfredo. And I would tell the staff, like, let's make the best fettuccine Alfredo that we can make for this customer, because it's what they want. And continuing to do that, eventually I went to Israel on a trip where I was walking through the markets, and this is after a couple years of Domenica being open. This is after Katrina and my kind of like understanding that that I can bring joy back to people through food. And so I felt more confident in who I was. And as I'm walking through the markets in Israel and I'm hearing people talk, like I almost heard my grandmother's voice kind of like saying, like, this is who you are, like this is the food that I cooked with you, and this is what I taught you, and you've like pushed it away. And it was the level of confidence that I had at the time that showed to me that I can actually do this. Like, I shouldn't be ashamed of who I am, of where my bloodline lies, and I should really now embrace that. And if I can do that, that would mean the world to me. And I feel like I can bring joy to people through that. And I came back and started sneaking Israeli food onto the menu at Domenica. It got really nuts at one point. I was making hummus and just calling it chechi puree, and I was, putting za'atar on pizza crusts, and serving labna with roasted cauliflower, and just calling it Italian, and as I was cooking this, I was making shakshuka with like goat and mushrooms and in the oven, and I was like, as I was doing this, I saw that people really connected with that food. Like whether they cared that it was Italian or not, there was a connection there, and I felt that my true self was finally starting to emerge, that I was kind of tapping into where I came from as a person. And then I eventually it got to the point where I was like, I need an outlet. Like Dominica is going to lose its identity as an Italian restaurant if I'm like, putting all this Israeli influence into it. So I opened Shaya only with the intent to give myself an outlet to kind of reconnect with who I was. And I knew that people would like it because everybody likes hummus and everybody likes pita bread. Even bad versions of it they like. And I was like, let me try to kind of just tell my full story of who I am as a chef, as a person, versus just kind of the direction that I went to when I was younger because of insecurities. And then that's when it all clicked. And just like Will and Ashley and Gary were saying, it was really the first time in my life that we all gathered around a round table. Chef Zach was there, and our chefs and managers, and we all sat down and we created that restaurant together. It was a round table discussion of how do we cook this food and make it in a way that's going to change people's kind of conception about what hummus or pita is, but really remind them of what it is, like not try to make square pitas or like some kind of weird hummus, but like just make it right and put everything that we have into it. And I think the relevance comes into where instead of like trying to push forward, I was pulling back, and I was saying, let me go back to my roots. Let me go back to the perfect pita, the perfect hummus, the perfect falafel, the perfect kebab. It doesn't need to be something new. We don't need to make it in a way that's unrecognizable. We just have to do it right, and we got to put our hearts into it. And with the team that we had, a lot of stars aligned. And I think that I opened an Israeli restaurant in New Orleans at a time where that it could only have happened at that time. Had I tried to do that 2 years after Katrina or a year before Katrina, it wouldn't have worked. I didn't have the time in the city to build the trust of the community, to be involved in the community, to meet and begin to work with really smart, talented individuals. And so it's all these stars that kind of aligned, and I can't really put a measure on what relevance is, because it's all relevant, right? It's all where you are, what you're feeling, who you're cooking for, who you're working with. And I think today what makes us relevant is that we're working together at it, that our team is so strong and so smart, and that we have this collective vision on how to do something that has a meaning, and it's been working out.
It's really interesting because it's almost like there was some kind of internal conflict or, internalizing going on, whether it was with Katrina or your trip back to Israel, where you in a way took that and let it make you more authentic to yourself.
For sure.
And then that authenticity turns into a James Beard Award for Best Chef in the South in 2015 and James Beard Award for Best New Restaurant 2016 with Shire. And it's totally quantified as being the right decision. And like you said,
and then Chef Zach won a Beard Award for Rising Star in 2017. And that, like, to me, is showing that, like, the vision of pulling back to kind of remember what makes people happy, whether it was that plate of red beans and rice after Katrina, or it was me working with Zach to open Shaya, and me pulling myself back as a manager to say, shut up, like, let's listen, let's hear what he has to say. Let's hear what the person next to him has to say. Let's hear what the manager has to say. And let's do this together. And like start listening and stop talking. And I think it was a lot of levels of pulling back in a lot of different ways. And in one way, it's been able to allow us to push forward.
If I can add on to what Alon said, I think so many cooks and restaurant folks go through this period of like feeling like going into the world of cooking, you have to get away from where you come from. And a big part of that place when you realize that you have this story to share and this voice to do it. And I think that's where the evolving, starts, and being able to put all these creative ideas starts with, loving the joy you find in your home story and who you are. And I think beyond just evolving as a person or a restaurant, a whole cuisine evolves. And all the ways that Southern cuisine has evolved over the past forever. But I feel like, in the past 10 years has been really exciting. So
It has.
Really
I'd
has.
say that my favorite restaurants in general, the ones that I enjoy as a consumer, are the ones that make a statement, that are true to themselves. You have an individual, be it front of house or back of house, that is saying, this is who I am. And it's not trying to be all things to all people. Those restaurants don't inspire me. Those restaurants that really are trying to do everything, well, you can't do everything because no one's that talented.
I think the challenging part, and I love that you said the word confidence, is I think you need a certain amount of confidence to actually do anything that's innovative or, to use today's word, relevant. But you end up having to somehow figure out a way to get that confidence before you do it. At 11 Madison, we got 4 stars from the New York Times just by going to other really good restaurants and seeing what they did well and copying those things. And we'd go to we were like curators more than we were creators. We'd say, oh, hey, this guy has a big cheese cart. I guess we need one of those. Or this restaurant, the women are made to dress like men, so I guess we need to dress our women like men. Or this restaurant has all these stacks of plates. I guess that's what we need to do. And then inevitably, once you get the accolades that come from not actually doing anything that's truly groundbreaking, then you get the confidence to actually do something groundbreaking.
Right.
And it's kind of messed up in a way, but it does make sense. I mean, it's that way in life. You
And
need
you
the
guys
confidence.
actually got a less than favorable review back in the day, and you took it as inspiration.
Yes.
Tell us about it, because I think, and I'm going to open it up for questions for you guys for the last 15 minutes here, but I've got one last question.
Yes.
We often find ourselves in moments of turmoil, right? You read a bad review or you get some bad feedback from one of your guests, and it breaks your heart because you put so much into it. But you actually went ahead and put posters of the musician up on the wall and used it as inspiration.
And we've gotten a few bad reviews over the years. I think, the review you're talking about, that was the first one by Moira Hodgson in the New York Observer. And at that point, we were really looking out for Frank Bruni in the New York Times. But it was our first review, and we were craving feedback. And at the end, the criticism was, I wish this restaurant had a little bit more Miles Davis. And Daniel and I, again, we were back in that little windowless office. One day I want windows in my office. That's like a professional goal. And we read that, and Daniel's like, well, what the hell does that mean? And I was like, dude, I don't know. But it came at a time when we were craving language. I think that's one of the greatest things I learned from Danny was the importance of language to articulate where you're going. Because you have 150 people that you're managing, and you want to be moving in the right direction. And so we started reading that. And everything we could about Miles Davis. And that's where we came up with those 11 words. When I talk about endless reinvention and collaborative and forward-moving, fresh, innovative, light, those were all the words we found most commonly used to describe the approach Miles Davis took to his career. And a list of those words do hang in our office. But when we finally did have the confidence and we started really digging in and we finally started creating the restaurant that we wanted to go to as opposed to the 4-star restaurant that already existed, which was the one that got us 4 stars, then we just got ripped. I mean, people didn't seem to like it a lot in the beginning, but, and they still don't. There's people in this room who've written bad reviews about us, but, but when you feel a connection to what you're doing, That's the only thing that matters. And you need to listen to the feedback because you can't be so caught up in yourself that you're not open to other perspectives. But yeah.
Very cool. Very
It's
cool.
always fun.
Okay, so I know you guys have got lots of great questions out there. So if you do, please put your hand up. We have a microphone that's going to run out to you, and you can get involved. And if you have none, then I have lots. Yes.
Hello, I'm Brian. I'm from Dallas with the Front Burner Restaurant Group. And one thing that I'm always trying to figure out how to motivate the staff is during pre-shift. So what is it that the four of you would do to inspire in 20 minutes prior to service with your staff?
Go on, Gary. Kick it off.
Sure. Well, it depends on the day. Obviously, so much of it is actually knowing your team and knowing and having a pulse of what that team needs on that day. We go in with a plan, right? All of us have these operations that well-oiled machines, but sometimes there's a mood that you're going to feel, and you look around the room, and the worst thing you could do is just go through the list of reservations and dietary restrictions like you always do. Sometimes that's the moment to stop and make a statement about why we do what we do and do something inspiring. Sometimes it's a little too loose, and people are not focused. So then it is time to talk about dietary restrictions and bring them back and get them focused. I think more so it's giving ourselves as leaders the ability to step back just enough so we can see it. So we can see what's going on and understand where our people are on that day for that shift, so that when we go, and we're going to do the 119 covers tonight, which is at Alinea, a beast, but that means that we're all focused for all 8 hours of service, and that's it.
I would say it's sharing information, sharing as much as you can, creating opportunities for learning experience in that time before the shift, and really including the team. And I think with respect to sharing information on food or wine, sharing it with front and back of the house the same way that you would if you're a chef, the same way you teach it to a cook. So explaining the ingredients, but also the how and the why, and sharing the opportunity for people to really feel the food and to feel the beverage and to be very thoughtful about the hospitality.
I've done a few pre-meals with you, Ashley. We've been lucky enough to cook together several times, and I feel like your pre-meals are always very inspirational. And,
Oh, geez, thanks.
And really, I think, and I'm not just saying that I'm saying it because I learned something from your pre-meals that, she really tells a story, and you talk about a specific dish, but then you go back to like the person that you met that kind of inspired that dish, that made you become inspired by it, and like a little funny thing about how it all came together and why you serve it today and what makes it so special to be serving it today. And I think people connect with the stories, because we've seen it a few times where we sit down and we just start going through the list. Are you wearing your socks? Or is your apron clean? Are you, here's what the, ice cream flavor of the day is, blah, blah, blah. And everyone's just kind of sitting there like looking around. And when you can say something that takes that monotony away from of all the information that you have to go through and turn it into some type of storyline, that's when I usually see the eyes light up. And we've also made a commitment to serve something to them every single time. Like they're going to be tasting something, they're going to be drinking something, their senses are going to be moving around, because you're kind of forcing it through, like, here, engage in this meal or in this drink with me.
I love that you asked about that, because I think pre-meal is the most important 30 minutes of the entire day at a restaurant. It's when there's 30, 40 people that are individuals, and it's during that time that they cease being individuals and they start to become a team. And we take it so seriously. One of the things that I always say to my team is, hey, don't waste those 30 minutes. Make sure you prepare for them. And it happens all the time in our business where suddenly pre-meal's about to start and you're like, all right, what am I going to talk about today? You just wasted that moment. And so I think preparation is a huge part of it. And I also think, listen, we are constantly, all of us, inspired every single day, and yet for some reason so few of us actually take the things that inspire us and share them with the other people. the beauty of taking outside perspective and bringing it into the walls of your restaurant is insanely powerful. I went to Mount Rushmore on my honeymoon. I drove across the country. I went to Mount Rushmore. And for whatever reason, I was really inspired by Mount Rushmore. I was inspired that there was some dude at some point that was walking down the street, looked up at a mountain, and was like, I have an idea. Let me spend the next 30 years of my life carving a bunch of faces into the mountaintop. And I was like, I'm doing nothing with my life. And so for a week, we talked about Mount Rushmore in pre-meal at 11 Madison Park. I went to see Rocky the musical. And halfway through the musical, they moved the audience onto the stage and the stage into the audience. I thought that was really inspiring. We talked about Rocky the musical for a week. I think it's just about bringing fresh perspective. If you see something that gets you fired up, write it down and make sure you talk about it with your team. I think the other thing, and this is much more basic, this is what I always tell my managers when they're giving pre-meal. You need to be super passionate and excited about what you're talking about. And too many people respond to the facial expressions of the people in the group. Listen, here's the deal. A lot of us, when we're paying attention, we look like we are not paying attention. We look like we're not interested. We have that resting face. It's just like... And if you feed off the energy of the people that you're speaking to, you're never going to bring it as energetically or as powerfully as they ultimately crave you to.
It's so true. We do a smile chain. So that because of that face, I got so sick of standing there and talking to a group of people with that face. I was like, all right, I'm done with this. If I smile at you, you have to smile at someone else, and they have to smile, and you have to keep it going. And it's turned into a thing that we now do during service. So as we're in service, because it's very easy to get too serious about what you do, and if you just give someone that smile, and they're like, shit, now I've got to find someone else to smile at, it turns into this silly little game that we play that kind of is fun, and our guests respond to it.
I'm so stealing that.
Yeah, take it.
Can I mention
I'm writing it down as we speak.
smile freezer tag?
A friend of mine, Ben Shuri from Attica Restaurant, he actually decided that once a week he would make the staff tell a story. It can be about anything they like. It can be about their dog getting sick. It can be about how they met their wife. It can be about a restaurant they worked in. And they have what they call Attica stories. And they stand up in pre-shift and they spend 20 minutes telling a story. So on that particular day, it's 20 minutes longer. And he said it's connected his team in a way that he never imagined possible. And, it's absolutely worked. And that's something that I totally stole. So
I was just trying to play the smile game with you guys. None of you did it. I smiled at 4 of you, and you all just like, okay.
I want to mention one other thing to the pre-shift that we recently adapted, and that's when we bring a new dish out, instead of just having a chef de cuisine or a sous chef present the dish, we have the cook who's cooking it present it to the team, which gets everybody more comfortable with speaking and presenting, and drives them to have a better understanding of it. So
it's really cool. Another question? Yes.
Hi, I'm T from New Orleans, and while we are all talking about service here, and I think everybody's focused on it, I feel like the state of service in America is pretty horrible. Is there, in general, not in your restaurants, which I love, can each of you or any of you share an actual specific way that you teach hospitality, a real specific thing?
I'll jump in and say, one of our goals is to remove the idea of hospitality being a transaction. And we have a real simple thing, much like your smile, the smile check. We don't use the word customer, we only use the word guest. And to me, it's the idea of if I walk up to a counter, hand someone money, and they hand me something back, that's a transaction and I'm a customer. I can do that at the hardware store, the grocery store, anywhere. And I think what we do in restaurants is beyond that. And so it's kind of a simple, silly thing. We refer to that other word as the C word, and nobody in our organization uses it. We only say guest. And I think it's not just about that one thing. It's how it relates to everything else we touch in the space.
We were talking about this a couple weeks ago. For a long time, everyone would say you can't teach hospitality. You're either born or raised with it. And I don't agree with that. But then I also don't know if the word teach is the right thing. I think it's maybe inspire or bring out. I think everyone has a lot of hospitality in them. They have a lot of graciousness in them. The thing is, you don't know how to serve unless you've learned first how to receive. And I think a lot of people that are not kind, and this transcends our restaurants, I think this is a life statement, are those that have just never known what it's like to receive kindness. And so we teach service. We're very maniacal in teaching service. I think in terms of hospitality, we just try to take such good care of our people that they know what it's like to be taken care of, because then it becomes addictive to want to take care of other people. And it's one of my favorite things. Because we're in this business, because we love taking care of people, and most of the people we take care of, especially at 11 Madison Park, we never even see them again. But if you take that good care of your staff and then you get to see them the next day, I mean, that's the best. And it's one of my favorite things about what we get to do for a living.
We've just decided that we're working on kind of developing this now, but doing regularly scheduled educational programs, but not in a classroom setting, but having something where every 4 weeks or every 6 weeks, we're taking our team somewhere to learn something and team build together. We went whitewater rafting yesterday. Nobody tried to push me off the boat. I thought it was a success. But like, you know, we have so many amazing people outside of our restaurant that we get to work with, our gelato maker, our blueberry farmer, the person that's going out and foraging for chanterelle mushrooms to bring them to the restaurant. Even our chefs and our servers that are really good at what they do can come in and present something to our team. Like our chef from Dominica can come and teach our team at Shia how to make really good salami and put on a little cooking demonstration for them. And again, like Will was saying, you're serving your people, you're showing them kindness, and you're giving them a piece of yourself, and the good ones will receive it well and then give it back to somebody else.
We talk about this a lot. Alinea is a kind of environment as a diner that can be off-putting. It's alarming. You can have 14 through 22 courses and never see a plate. It's possible, right? So what do we do from a service standpoint? Where do we build hospitality in? And a lot of that for us is saying the staff, we as the front of house, have to be that entry point. We have to be the connection between the cuisine or the technique or the ingredient to the guest. How do we connect those two? So hospitality kicks in there. For us, it's a matter of taking the data. Our staff has to be just encyclopedic for knowing every single ingredient on every single technique on every single thing that's going to be presented. But they have to take that knowledge and now personalize it. You know, for those people that drive manual transmission, if you know how to do it, you really know how to drive manual transmission when you don't have to think about what gear you're in, right? You're just, when somebody asks you, you're like, well, the music's blaring, and we're having a conversation, and I guess I'm in third. You know, you don't think about that. That's where we need to get. And hospitality can happen once you're that relaxed with the subject matter. If I ask you your birth sign, it's effortless. If I ask you where you came from, no problem. The knowledge is there, and then you can step back, and now we can just have a conversation. We can talk. We can engage, and that's hospitality.
I also think a huge part of it is what happens when things go off the rails. The less than perfect experience, and a big part of engaging a team, I think, is about teaching them to use the tools which we have so many tools to access. And I'm a big believer that some of the greatest experiences that we make are when things didn't go great and we had the chance to take them above and beyond. I view that as an opportunity, and I think empowering your staff to feel that too, and to know that we can fix this, and just being open to that.
We've got time for just one more question. It's really, I think thinking outside of the box is also really important. I recently gave a copy of the best places in the world to work. Was a title of a book that I gave to all of my management crew. And what you learn in a book like that is it has nothing to do with money. It has a lot to do with culture, which is effectively what all these guys are talking about. And I think building a really strong, positive culture is a good starting point. One last question? Yes, please. The mic's on its way.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Sandy Wilder. I'm from Naples, Florida. I was in the restaurant business all through college, and then I owned my own for about 20 years. And I married my lovely husband here, and I wanted to open another restaurant. He said, hell no. So we had to come to a happy medium somewhere. And so we do a food and wine tour in Naples, Florida, and we highlight locally owned entrepreneurial restaurants. And so we pick people up, we take them there and everything. And now our problem is they like those restaurants so much we don't get business. So my question is we love what we do, and we love bringing notice to these locally owned entrepreneurial restaurants with the fabulous little chefs. But is there any advice you would say for us to maybe reinvent, or maybe give us some inspiration to keep going? When, because we are very seasonal. So right now we just appeal to the locals. There's not a lot of tourism, and then when tourists come, it's great. But right now we want to still be able to take people and get our locals to get out and appreciate out of their norm where they normally go to the normal restaurants they like.
It's a good question.
I don't know.
Have you ever sat down with the restaurateurs and the chefs that you highlight on the tour and had a collaborative discussion with them about how you all win?
Not altogether, no, because we do. Not altogether, because as you do know, there are some chefs that do not collectively like to share information. And unfortunately, those are some of the best ones, but they're not the best ones to bring together in a forum, so to speak. So separately, yes, I've dealt with all of them separately, and they struggle sometimes. They even close for a month or two because there are no locals that come on a regular basis, and if they do, if anybody else is from Naples, I'm sorry. But we are the second highest capita of millionaires in the country, and there's a reason why.
I think Curtis's point is actually great. I think it's so much establishing your collective vision. What do you want to do together? And I think that if you're able to define that as a group, I think that would be step one. I mean, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm thinking about this in the idea of like creating auction items. And, we never like to give a $100 gift certificate to something because it doesn't create a unique value. So I think if you're able to collaborate, which has been a big word across all these panels, with the chefs that you're working with, and to create a unique experience that belongs only to your work with those chefs, then you have something to offer that someone can't just walk in and access on their own. So I think it's about creating a unique experience.
You know what I think would be really cool? Is if,
Whitewater rafting?
Yeah. But like if through that collaboration effort, say that you're dealing with a lot of locals, right, that you're seeing over and over again and that are trusting you to take them out. If you could make it more personal to them and collaborate with the chefs to say, hey, we're going to do like a recipe contest, like everybody hand in their favorite home recipe, and then we're going to get one of the chefs to cook that recipe for us when we go to the restaurant. And it could be like a little competition thing, like a lottery. And then you're connecting somebody's story with an experience. The chef is then connecting with that person's story. It builds a relationship that may be stronger than just being the restaurateur and customer or guest experience. And it's through that kind of relationship that you'll see people really start to connect, and it'll grow, and then it'll become interesting and more special for people versus just going out to eat. You got to get the chefs on board. And so you got to say, look, even to some of the chefs that might not be so nice, you say, look, I want to bring people to your restaurant. The tourists aren't here right now. It's slow. You need business. Like, let's work together, and maybe we can do a Christmas in July dinner or something like that, and everybody can put in their favorite Christmas recipes, and the chef can then do his take on it or her take on it, and make something special that, like Ashley was saying, you can't just get as a regular paying customer.
I'd say two things. First, you all heard it, that at Shaya, we're doing Christmas in July. And I think that's just brilliant, and I can't wait to see what you guys cook up. I think the experience...
Chinese food.
Yes.
Brilliant.
I think the experience needs to begin far before people walk into the restaurant. And I don't know what that means. I'm not sure I understand exactly how this works and whether you're actually bringing people there. But I think some of the greatest innovation starts with just writing down like what you do that are consistent with what other people that do the same thing you do are doing, and then come up with just really out there ways to make it cooler. How are you getting there? What is the experience? What happens from the moment they make the reservation until a month after they're done with your tour? If your entire experience is limited just to the time you're at someone else's restaurant, I think there's a lot of creativity that's being left on the table. And that's what I would say. I would think about the month before the meal and the month after the meal, and think through, if you were on your tour, what would blow your mind? And do that.
Well, guys, I know there's lots more to eat and drink out there, but it's nice to sort of slow down for a minute and hear from such incredible industry leaders. So can we put our hands together? Well done, guys.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was awesome.
I sure learned lots, and I hope you did too. Enjoy the rest of your stay up here in Aspen.
Thank you.